So my technique here is to, let's see, we'll copy that. So my technique here is to determine my ratio. So I already know I'm gonna have a ratio of about 3 to 1. And before I get into that, why did I use compression? So on vocals, you're pretty much always gonna use compression at some point. There's never gonna be a time where you don't have to use compression. My goal for this first compressor, because we use 2 compressors in this instance, my goal for this first compressor is to manage anything that becomes too loud. So I'm not worried about a compressed sound at this point. I'm fixing the problems first. So these first 3 plugins are pretty much going to be fixing the problem. So if there's any. So what I like to do, a trick that I like to do is, I'm going to say this again just in case. So I like to start with a 3 to 1. Then I bring this attack all the way down. Then I bring this release all the way up. So I got the fastest attack, the slowest release. And then I'm dragging this threshold down until I'm getting about 12 dB of compression. Past 10 dB of compression, that compression becomes super noticeable. I push the release up until that vocal, that reduction meter starts to jump. And then I push it back just a little bit so that we can control that, because we don't want to introduce pumping. And then with this attack, I let up on the release. I let up on the attack just enough to let some transients come through. But the goal here, like I said, is to manage those peaks. And then after that, I just set this threshold to go to the very top of that vocal. So I'm getting about no more than 3 dB of gain reduction, as you can see we've introduced here. In this case, I think I was getting about maybe 2 or 3 dB of 2 or 3 dB of gain reduction, but I wanted to push that level a little bit more. So after that, I pretty much add whatever I want. So in this case, I felt like my vocals were a little bit too thin. So I did push about a dB. Let's see, what's that? 200 hertz. I'm pushing this area though so that I can get a little bit of that warmth. So the alternative to this frequency range is that warmthness. So the first thing I did, however, was push this 8,000 hertz up, and that's pretty much standard when it comes to vocals. Pretty much any vocal that I do, I'm pushing up that 8K and above just to get a lot of that presence and to get that vocal to sit a little bit more on top of the beat. And so you'll notice when I push this up, that vocal just all of a sudden just sounded on top. It wasn't a volume thing, it was more of a tone thing. So that tone allowed us to sit that vocal on top. I cut out any low rumble that was there from what we didn't fix, and compression also tends to kind of add that back in. So we definitely cut that out. After that, I'm introducing another compressor, and as you'll see, my first thought was to go for a 2A because that's my default. So I did that kind of out of habit. My voice is very bright, and those LA 2As to me kind of add a little bit more brightness. And in that case, it was brightness that I kind of didn't favor. So I just threw on another R compressor because my mindset is workflow. Same technique here, but the mindset is different. So now we're using compression to shape the dynamics. We're basically changing the shape of the waveform. Keep in mind that you want your vocals to be as dynamic as possible, and if you can hear the compression, then you're pretty much kind of doing too much compression. In this case here, what I'm doing is I'm basically turning down the threshold, just getting a little bit into that vocal, and we're doing a much lower ratio. So we got almost 2 to 1. We got 1.8 to 1. I'm pushing this to allow energy back. So once I feel that that vocal almost sounds like it's not being compressed, I'm stopping right there, and the release is a lot faster. and that's pretty much a tone decision. So I use this release knob as a tone knob, um, which basically means if I were to um, set this a little bit faster, the vocals would sound a little bit more aggressive. But if I set it a little bit more back, they tend to sound more smooth. So I kind of set it in the middle, so it's not too aggressive, but it's not too smooth. The other thing I added to pretty much create my tone was more top end. So I did a high end shelf at 8K. Now I'm doing a high end shelf, or pretty much a high end bell curve at 15,000 hertz on this Manny Marroquin. By far, by the way, one of my favorite engineers. This bell curve though, on his EQ plugin, adding 15K, I almost always do this in addition to adding the 8K, because it just adds this expensive sheen to it that just sounds so magnificent. Again, with compression, we're introducing a lot more of that, 300 to 500 hertz range. So I tend to take that out, but I tend to move around to see exactly where it is, just to see. But it's not a big deal, because we've pretty much controlled that tone. But just in case, it's there. And guess what we've added to our vocal chain? You got it. That is the Magma BB tubes. I want this vocal in this sense to sound expensive. So I don't know how to explain it, but this vocal just this plugin makes everything sound like you recorded it in $1 million studio. I did the beauty setting. I didn't do a lot of aggressive beast setting. I normally do beauty in addition to beast, but I took an opportunity to add a little bit more top end. I felt like I could get a little bit more out of it. And this is clean top end. This isn't sounding too harsh, at least in my ears. It's not sounding harsh at all, right? So, again, I just added a de-esser at the end of the chain. Same frequency range. This time I did a split. This is just one of those safety net things that I didn't hear it be harsh, but just in case it's harsh, let's attack it. All right. So from there, you're pretty much done with the mix. And let's see, I pretty much moved my settings over. And my thought process behind the background aux bus is pretty simple. It's match them to the main vocals, make them sound like one complete vocal, and you don't want those background vocals to outshine the main vocals. Okay, so I haven't heard this in stereo, but I promise you, if I hear this in stereo, those vocals are going to be wide, and they're going to be complementing the main vocals. So I got this de-esser, same EQ setting. Oh, by the way, I did a low shelf at 390 hertz, almost 400, and below, because that is it was a little bit too muddy for me. And so, as you can see, I just brought back in 200 hertz, and I did a bell.